Hi. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Stephen Turk. I'm going to be moderating the panel. My knowledge of Matheson Westerns is going to be, I'm going to learn as you all learn with this. You know, so I'm going to be helping the guys out with just ask them a couple questions to get started, and then help them when we get to the question and answers part where you guys can ask yourself. But I'm going to be joined with two guys that know Matheson way better than I do, probably most people. We have Matthew Bradley and we have Paul Studi. And you guys have, written different books and other stuff on this?
Yeah, I am the author of Richard Matheson on the Screen, and I edited Matheson's book Duel and the Distributor. And with Paul, I co-edited the Richard Matheson Companion, which was then done as a revised and updated version of Twilight and Other Zones, which you can see held up by Paul.
We didn't get to pick that title.
No. We were just talking about that. I said, I don't know why they even felt the need to be changed. Richard Matheson Companion kind of set off.
That was a good title.
What are you doing? So before I let Paul talk more, I have also written introductions for I Am Legend, Hell House, Where Dreams May Come, Noir, 3 novels of suspense. I did a reader's group guide to Summer in Time. That was fun. And I did a huge series for Tor.com, which is now React Tor, about Matheson's career and his life. Yeah. So when I first went to look for the old post, I was like, what's this? Oh, it used to be Tor.com. And of course, I've written about Richard for many publications. So, Paul.
Yes. I've been a fan and a collector for a long time. I got started with being more involved with books and things with Duel and Distributor, which Matthew did. I have some concept art in my collection for Duel, which was, I think, commissioned by Universal, and they never did anything with it. And so I loaned some of those to the publisher so they could be reprinted in the book, and then got involved with the companion. And more recently, I pulled together about 100 pages. Everybody in this room looks familiar. You guys all hear me say this? Is there anybody new? About 100 pages of rare correspondence. There you go. That's enough. So Suntop Press just republished Born of Man and Woman, the collection from 1954, and I contributed about 100 pages of letters and correspondence and some manuscripts and things like that people don't normally see, and that's kind of fun. And I'm trying to see if people are interested in a poster. Again, I think everybody in the room has seen this, but there's enough interest. I'll produce these up to an edition of 100, I think. And so new artwork by Harry O. Morris, and a complete list of everything Matheson ever wrote, color-coded by genre, over 300 things over the course of his career. So take a look before.
I guess we should say everything ever published.
This is correct.
Since the poster would stretch across this table.
Be a much bigger poster. And cards as well. There's a website. You can drop me a line as well.
So moderate.
So when I was told I was going to be moderating this, which was at the beginning of the convention, and I was looking into it, it happens to all of us, I love Matheson's work. I've read some of his different books and things like that. And I think he's a chameleon of writers when you get into his westerns and other genres, because I didn't know he did westerns until I saw the title, what was going on. And I did a modicum of a dive into it, but I didn't have a chance, obviously, to read any of the literature in the short notice I had. And I think the way he writes, from my understanding of looking at his labor, so you guys can explain, I think the reason it translates to all these genres is he's able to take the ordinary people and show the different things that we can relate to, and then change it, which we see in his horror and science fiction works, to extraordinary things right there. But unlike other westerns that were coming out in the past and at the time he put these, because a lot of these were written soon prior, he went into different details than your typical westerns would do because of his way he would explain the ordinary and put in these circumstances. So I was wondering if you can talk about how his other work, his other genres, led into how it translates so well into this genre, because some of his work was award-winning in the Western field, if I'm correct.
Yes, that's true. He did get, for one of his lawman teleplays, Yawkey, won the Writers Guild of America Award, and his first published Western novel, Journal of the Gun Years, got the Golden Spur Award from the Western Writers of America, so it was well recognized.
Which is their top award, novel of the year, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know, you want to tackle that first? Or?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. You don't typically think of westerns when you think of Matheson. You think of fantasy and horror or terror, as he preferred, and other things. But he started writing them early, actually, and there were a number of short stories, peppered in the early years of his career, and then there were a number of teleplays, which Matthew will spend some time on, and then there were some novels, that appeared, in the 90s, really. Some of those were written earlier and just wanted to be published later, but Gun Years was written at least in the 80s, you were saying earlier today.
Yes, he told me at the time that he had sold it, that he'd written it 10 years earlier, so that would be probably, around
82,
80, somewhere in the early 80s,
I've got some of the correspondence that I referenced a little bit ago. I got some notes from that that talk about westerns, so I'll read some of these. As early as August 1950, remember his first story was published in the summer of 1950 in the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction. So just a few months after that, he was writing a letter to his friend George Haas. It says, "Dear George, I'm proud as punch. Sold the very first western I ever wrote. I sat down one day and said to myself, young man, you have seen 2,367 Randolph Scott pictures, 357 Joel McCrea pictures, not to mention the odds and ends stretched out over the years. If you cannot sit down now and write a western, you are an impossible dullard." So I sat down and wrote one. My agent calls it a bloodbath, but he sold it right off the bat. Shucks, nothing to it. Ha, tooey. Ding. End quote. And that wound up being They Don't Make 'Em Tougher, which wound up being published in Dime Western in May of 1955. That was his sixth sale. Western was his sixth sale. And then later on in 52, he had a hard time finding that when it came out, and he wrote back to Haas in 52 and said, "Last night I did come across my first Western. It's in the May issue of Dime Western, which sells at 25 cents for some unusual semantic idiocy." They changed the title incredibly, but didn't take more out of it than 3 words, all of which were bastard, bastard, and bastard. Guess they cater to the home trade. In my latest westerns, I shall call all villains cads or beasts or, quote, "Draw your guns, you despicable and ignoble blackguards," said Slim Martin, slitting his 3 eyes and swallowing his whiskey, glass and all, and so on, end quote. He had a great sense of humor, and I enjoyed finding it in these letters that I was going through, because it isn't always so evident in the sort of paranoid and terrifying and suspenseful works that he wrote, but it's really evident in some of his correspondence and things like that.
By the way, I always found it interesting to note, in addition to all the Joel McCrea and Randolph Scott movies he claimed to have seen at that point, Matheson was hospitalized during World War II with a combat-related injury, which was a trench foot. And he said that while he was in the hospital, he read 2 westerns a day, which shows how quickly what a fast read they usually are. But, so yeah, it really did, even as far back as that, he was just a tremendous fan of the genre. So.
I've got a few more little snippets from letters here, and I'll just plow through them, if you don't mind. April of 53, again to George Haas. My agent has the same agent, this would have been a Hollywood agent, I think, not Harry, from the context. But it says, the same agent has a screen treatment I wrote for a Western, which he is trying to sell. Sounds crazy, but I don't imagine any of them will really sell. I don't even think about it. And
that was when?
That was April of 53. My note here is, what might this have been, which was a question to you. Do you have any idea? 53?
I was just wondering, and it seemed too early to be the Samuel Goldwyn thing.
Yeah.
Reading screen treatment?
The same agent has a screen treatment I wrote for a Western, which he is trying to sell.
Huh.
Sounds crazy, but I don't imagine any of them will really sell. I don't even think about it.
I cannot know.
Yeah, 53.
That's awfully early.
Yeah, and all the teleplays and stuff didn't start until 59. So I don't know what it might have been. Might have wound up making it into a short story at some point. But even in 53, he was writing, screen treatments and things. In 54, he wrote to Haas, "Right now I'm sitting on the stove waiting to hear if I have to revise my Western for Dell. I have already received from them a huge sheaf of papers with their ideas on revision. I refused 90% of them as I thought they would reduce my book to the ranks of the lowest of the low. I thought this would get me off that hook, but no, the editor of Dell is not displeased, and I may yet have to revise." And this wound up being The Gun Years, which was eventually published.
No, Gunfight, right?
I have The Gun Years.
No, this is the thing where he turned it into a screenplay and forgot he wrote the novel, remember?
Okay. What's the short stories?
By the Gun.
By the Gun. All right.
No, this got to be the Gunfight, because he
Okay.
talked about how early he written it.
All right. Matthew is my fact checker.
Well, it's just such a funny story, because he said, I remember telling you,
interviewed him.
right, that it was published as a novel, and finally in 1993, but he said what happened was, he wrote it as a novel, we're fairly sure it's the one he's talking about here, was never published, or wasn't published at the time. And then he sort of stuck it in a drawer or something, and then a friend of his named William R. Cox, who was a Western writer, said, "Hey, that'd make a good movie." He said, "Yeah." So the two of them together turned it into a screenplay, which was never produced. But he said he got so accustomed to thinking of it in terms of the screenplay that he literally forgot he wrote the novel. Seems hard to believe, but. So then after a Journal of the Gun Years, the first published Western novel, came out, he was looking around through his stuff and found it, in a drawer or something, and said, "Oh my goodness, what crap." Submitted it to Gary Goldstein, who had edited Journal of the Gun Years, and he said, "Yeah, let's do that." So I had quite a long road to seeing the light of day in any form.
Right.
So yeah, that's why I'm fairly sure that's.
No, you're right. I just checked my notes and I just.
My apologies, but.
No, I appreciate it. July of 54, again to Haas. "Looks like I might sell my Western novel to Dell. I'm rewriting it now. Have done some research on the West, cattle raising and what have you, and find it very interesting. Plan to write a book about cattle raising on Mars next. Round up at Canal Town. Just needless to add, kidding," he says.
No hot tui there.
No hot tui there. And then a few months later, in August of 54, "Working on a rewrite of my Western now, just sent out 50 pages of it, hoping for a commitment from Dell. We'll try for a hardcover deal on it. Dell says they'll reprint it, then the hardcover house sees the manuscript. With a sure reprint by Dell, most any hardcover house would take it. Queer business. Well, back to the Old West. Think I'll shoot off some main character today. Ah, the godlike powers of the author." And in 57, he said, again to Haas, these are all letters to George Haas, a friend of his in the Berkeley area. "I was writing a real novelty for Sam Goldwyn Jr., a Western fantasy. I was all excited about it, but he and I couldn't see eye to eye on the way to present the supernatural, so he decided not to go ahead with it." And this would have been Shadow on the Sun, which wound up being published in 1994. So from 57 to 94. So a lot of
He
these things sat in the drawer for a while.
He started when he was recovering from a slipped disc after he came back from England, when he went over to write the script for Hammer, was supposed to be the Hammer Films version of I Am Legend, that evolved or devolved into The Last Man on Earth. And apparently it never even reached the script stage, because, as you say, Goldwyn got cold feet.
Yeah, which is too bad. So the short stories that Matheson published, there's 7 of them. One of them is hard to find. It escaped notice for a long time. Most of Matheson's bibliographies didn't have it. I'm embarrassed to say that ours didn't have it. We did find it eventually. It's called The Hunt, which appeared in West magazine in March of 52, and Barry Hoffman, I think, put it in one of the...
Oh, did he? I couldn't
I
remember.
think he did. I actually need to check on that. He may not have. I'm pretty sure he did. And so they don't make them tougher. The Dime Western one in May of 51, The Hunt in March of 52, The Conqueror, which is also known as Go West, Young Man. This is interesting. This was in Blue Book, May of 1954. You can find old issues of Blue Book all over the place for 10, 12 bucks. Not this issue. Does anybody know why, besides you? That issue contains the first appearance of Live and Let Die by Ian Fleming. And it is impossible to find. And if you do find it, it'll run you $500 and north of that. But for the placement in that issue, I'd have had this for $12 a long time ago. Too Proud to Lose and 15 Western Tales, February of '55. Son of a Gunman in Western Magazine, December of '55. And then 2 other short stories which were first published in '93 in his collection By the Gun, Little Jack Cornered and Of Death in 30 Minutes. But before they were published as short stories, they were television screenplays, which Matthew will start.
I will indeed. But I have to ask you, just because I've been meaning to ask you for the past couple of days, how many first publications of Matheson stories in the actual magazines do you still not yet own? That's obviously one of them.
One.
Well, that's
I
it?
actually do have this one.
Oh, you do have it?
I paid $500.
Oh.
I do have it.
When we say that Paul is a serious Matheson collector, we're not just Paul's book. So you now literally have all of them?
There's still one I'm missing.
Which is what?
I am missing Signature magazine from.
Drink of Water?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Signature was a magazine that was put out by Diners Club, and so I don't think a lot of them survived. Occasionally they pop up on eBay. It looks like a regular magazine. It's kind of like a people-sized magazine, but it was something that's, Diners Club members received as part of their membership. It was a monthly, and he had a story, and it's the only thing I've not been able to track down. We have a friend who has a copy, and I'm debating about how to acquire or steal it.
Is that a Western?
If anything, if he meets some bad end, we'll know why.
Yeah, I'm out of myself, haven't I? Sorry?
Is that a Western?
It's not a Western, no.
No. Well, as Paul brought up, the 2 stories in By the Gun, the '93 collection that had not been published before, he actually made use of them at the time. He'd written the stories, they hadn't been published, and so he turned them into teleplays. It's interesting also that, both in the case of the short stories and in the case of his screenwriting work, or television work in this case, the Westerns always were, right at the beginning of that. The published magazine stories were all within the first few years of his publishing career. And when he started to write for television, he initially collaborated on numerous occasions with his close friend, Charles Beaumont. The 2 of them both wrote heavily and were widely respected in the genre. Not Western, not in the Western genre at the time, but horror, science fiction, fantasy, etc. And although their prose writing styles were very different, they felt that their screenwriting styles were sufficiently similar that in order to kind of reinforce each other at a time when they were both still just beginners, that they would write something together. So they actually ended up doing, I think, 6 or 7, not all Westerns, but some of them, screenplays for various shows, The DA's Man and Markham, in addition to a number of Westerns. So, for example, the first one that they did together was, for the Westerns, was an episode of a show called Buckskin. The title was Active Faith, and I'm frustrated to say that this show is so obscure that after all these years of searching, I have never found this episode. It's one of the few things of Matheson's that I've never been able to track down. It has all sorts of people. Nobody seems to have it or nowhere it can be found. I don't even know if it still exists anymore. But
It's like his signature magazine is what this is.
right, it's not the only, but it's one of the most conspicuous, right? So they did that together. They did an episode of Wanted, Dead or Alive, the bounty hunter show with Steve McQueen, which was called The Healing Woman. Yes, that was both of them. And together they did an episode of Have Gun Will Travel, a series with Richard Boone as Paladin, which is called The Lady on the Wall. A point of interest about that one is that it was directed by Ida Lupino, who did a lot of television direction and feature films too, but she really did a lot for TV. And a very interesting, early example of a successful female director when that was quite rare. She did, of course, a leading lady previously, and she was able to parlay her success in that area into some fine directing work.
So that was 1960.
Yes, it was. And she did a lot of episodes of that show, as well as, episodes of various.
Twilight Zone.
What's that?
The 16mm shot.
Twilight, right, she did work for Twilight Zone. And if I recall, isn't she unique in both appearing in and directing, not the same one, but episodes of the Twilight Zone? I think she's the only person who did one of each, right? Was in one and directed one? Yeah.
Could be. That sounds right.
Now, I've never found any reference to this anywhere else, but in 1984, Graham Flanagan and Mark Rathman published a pamphlet called He is Legend, an illustrated bio-bibliography of Richard Matheson, which to me was like ground zero of Matheson's scholarship. And I always sort of think it was like the acorn for which our oaks were born. And among other things, they listed some teleplays in there, and they, according to them, I have no reason to doubt them, but I've never seen anywhere else, the two of them also wrote a second script for Half Gun Will Travel called The Joust, which was never produced. I don't know what their evidence for that was. As I do, they didn't just make it up. But after years of searching, I cannot say I've corroborated that anyplace else.
Have we ever tracked them down to ask if anything for them?
One of them was dead, and they may both be dead by now, but no, I never, at least successfully, was able to get anything out of that. So, he wrote, not with Beaumont, but by himself, an episode of Cheyenne, the Clint Walker series called Home is the Brave. It's an interesting episode. The Cheyenne is assigned to accompany the body of a soldier to have it buried in his hometown. And when he gets there, he finds it's not as easy as you might think. The townspeople are all bitterly opposed to all this, and it turns out it's because the guy was, as would then be called, a half-breed. And he was also a bit of a jerk, but that's not necessarily here or there. But they, had huge objections to this burying in the cemetery, a half-breed, so-called. So Cheyenne has to go through all sorts of machinations and, fistfights and whatever to try to get the guy buried. Another what if, interestingly, he wrote, it didn't reach the script stage, but he was in early development of another Cheyenne episode called The Last Hour of John Butler Hickok. And if you think that name sounds like Wild Bill Hickok, that ain't no coincidence, which I asked him about. Oh, yeah, it was Wild Bill Hickok. Hickok, in fact, was a subject of great interest to Matheson, and he wrote a book called Memoirs of Wild Bill Hickok, another of his Western novels, published in '96. And like many of his Western novels, again, it grew out of a screen attempt. It started out as a screenplay that never sold, so then he converted it into the novel, and then reverse engineered it or something into a one-man stage play called Wild Bill. The screenplay was Wild Bill. The stage play was Wild Bill and His Lady, which was also never produced. Actually, one of a number of unsuccessful stage attempts by Matheson. He wrote a mystery and suspense play called Magician's Choice, soon after the success of Death Trap, I believe, wasn't it? I think
Was that about right?
I think so. I think that's one reason why they were going to do it, because Death Trap was such a big hit.
There you go.
And Robert Altman was going to direct it. And they were, very close to production, but Altman did the production of Come Back to the Five and Dime, Jimmy Dean, which apparently was not successful. And so they ended up pulling the plug on that and finally turned it into a novel called Now You See It. He wrote with Beaumont an unproduced play about Dylan Thomas. Was that something about Don't Go Grateful into That Good Night?
Something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So he had many stage productions that never got off the ground. He, of course, was desperate to make a musical of Somewhere in Time, which he never did, but others did right at the end of his life. So that was another unsuccessful stage.
Do Not Go Gentle.
Do Not Go Gentle, that's it, yes, thank you. So the Hickok thing was the same. It never even reached the script stage.
I'll just add that the book, the Memoirs of Wild Bill Hickok, is to date the only one of Matheson's novels that has not received a hardcover treatment. It was published as a paperback original, and there is not a hardcover of that.
Yeah, it's interesting because most of the Westerns, they were all done within a few years.
Yeah.
And the Evans and Company, if I recall, did the
Yeah.
hardcovers, and then the paperbacks were
Jove or Avon, I think.
something like that.
Yeah.
But I've forgotten, Hickok never had a hardcover.
Never.
It's sort of
Yeah.
pathetic.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
You would have thought that Cemetery Dance or Barry, well, Barry was going to do an omnibus of westerns at some
Oh,
point.
yeah, right.
And I-
Barry meaning Barry Hoffman.
Yeah,
of
sorry,
course,
Barry
but-
Hoffman.
So, yeah, that's kind of sad.
Berkeley, it looks like Berkeley.
Berkeley, yes, that's right, that's
Yeah.
right. So, well, poo on them. When it comes to Matheson's Western scripts, by far the most he did for a show called Lawman. And as a matter of fact, it may surprise folks to learn that he wrote more scripts for Lawman than for any other show except The Twilight Zone. And that's, especially for a guy not normally associated with Westerns.
Right.
That's a rather interesting fact. And as I said, 2 of those teleplays he did based on then unpublished short stories. Little Jack Cornered, which became Cornered, and 30 Minutes, yes, 30 Minutes, which was his first Lawman teleplay. And that was a good example of something he said he'd love to do, which was to write something. It was sort of one of these real-time stories where it took place in 30 minutes. He said he'd love to write that in real time, that way it had a very compressed time frame to kind of up the suspense. The show was about a marshal in was it Wyoming, I think, and his deputy, John McKay. And it's an interesting episode because the deputy is inside their local saloon, the Birdcage, and he gets wounded by this crazy guy who's Jack Elam, and he holds the deputy and the other people inside the saloon as hostage, and he wants the Marshal Van Troop, who John Russell played, a very taciturn but commanding man, to come and disarm himself and clear the streets so that he, the Jack Elam character, can escape. Of course, they don't have that, so there's all the, how will we resolve this? It's very cool. So, and as I said earlier, another of his Lawman episodes, Yawkey, did get the Writers Guild Award. Also an interesting story. It's about a gunman played by...
You should have your book here.
Yes, I know.
I was just looking up in ours, but we don't list the cast.
Right. Anyway, there's this gunman. And he comes into town and he says, I'm here to kill Marshal Van Troop. And Marshal Van Troop's like, oh, that's interesting. I have no idea who this guy is. I've never met him. I've never heard of him. I don't know why the fuck he'd be wanting to kill me. But Ray Danton, that's it, Ray Danton. So he says, well, I'll meet you out in the street and we'll, slap up or whatever. And the ultimate revelation, if you will, he goes to shoot it out with Dan Troop and loses, unsurprisingly. And it turns out that his gun didn't have any bullets in it. He was what we would call today committing suicide by cop because he had some terminal disease or something. And he said, well, I just, I forget it, had terminal. No, he was just weary of endlessly being challenged by people who said, oh, you think you're the fastest guy. Well, I'm faster than you are. And they never were. But after, shooting 17 men or whatever it was, he said, I can't do this anymore. But it was the only way. He was too chicken to kill himself directly. So he said, well, I'll just get Dan to do it for me. And interestingly enough, Mark Lawrence, the character actor whom some of you may know, directed one of them, which was Cornered, the adaptation of Little Jack Cornered, and starred in another one called Homecoming, which was about a terminal illness. And, he came back to the town or whatever, and everybody thought, because Dan Troop, I think, had arrested him or something, that he was there for vengeance. He said, no, actually, I'm just dying, and I just want to go back and die with my family. So I won't say I had to. The last one he did was kind of fun. It was called The Actor, and it was about a thespian who came to town, sort of a barnstorming type, and he was very complimentary to some married woman, and her husband took such umbrage at it that he shot the guy. And it was John Carradine played him, and of course Carradine having been a Shakespearean actor, so it was perfectly cast. And it was a wonderful episode. So that's Lawman.
Yeah, that's 10 TV episodes. How many did you mention that were not produced? There were a number.
Well, it's
There's a lot of westerns.
Yeah,
but
so
that's not
four
how westerns
produced plus
work.
6 on, and that's it, right? Two unproduced. The Joust, supposedly, and the last hour of John Butler Hickok, which, as I said, it never even reached the scripts. The interesting thing about that was that it came about because he was working with Jules Shermer, who had been the producer of Lawman. And Richard always said that Shermer was a great producer because he said he would get good directors and he would just leave my scripts exactly the way they were. He didn't change anything, and that Shermer was terrific. So Shermer was not normally a producer of Cheyenne, but they apparently decided to do a spin-off. Not is it the Dakotas? Something like that. And the spin-off, Shermer did it. Richard didn't have to do that. Shermer produced the spin-off, which, interestingly, if you look on the IMDb, it was shown as an episode of Cheyenne, but Cheyenne's not in it. But it was one of these backdoor pilot things where, like, well, we're just going to show it on Cheyenne, and it's really going to be the pilot, which it was. But, so technically it's Cheyenne, but if you look up Cheyenne, it ain't there. It's listed under the whatever the quotas or whatever. So it was with this same Shermer that he was going to do the Hickok thing, but it never happened. So, yeah, so that you say 10 teleplays. That's no small number.
And a small period of years. The first one was March of '59, the last one was May of '62. And I think what's interesting is just, there's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different TV shows in those 10 episodes. There are a lot of westerns going on in the early 60s.
Every show was a western.
Yeah, they completely dominated the airwaves
Yeah.
at that time.
They say,
Which partly explains why he was writing westerns.
Yeah, exactly.
There was a hell of a market.
Right now, you want to make a movie, make a superhero movie.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
They say that up until 1960, half of all movies made in America were Western.
Wow.
And that's like 50% cheap to make.
Yeah, the set is pretty, right out of the desert and point a camera somewhere. Yeah. But then,
Yeah, I think the teleplays certainly that he wrote with Belmont were pretty much split between those and sort of, mystery cop thriller, I say, for the DA's Man, for Markham, which was a sort of an amateur PI, I guess, a professional PI. Anyway, it was some kind of detective, played by Randall Lamb. And so he went back and forth between those two. So, but of course, again, that was what everybody was doing back then. So they said, well, if we're going to get into TV, let's start with the Westerns.
right.
So, and interesting, I'm sorry, just one last point about that. When they embarked upon this joint endeavor, not just surprisingly, they said when it came to the science fiction and fantasy stuff, like the Twilight Zone, they said, I think we could probably handle those on our own without any more, having to collaborate with anybody else. So they didn't collaborate on anything in that genre for TV. He and Beaumont did write one movie together, which was Night of the Eagle or Burn Which Burn, depending on where you see it, which is a wonderful film, but that was the only feature that they ever wrote together. So I'm sorry.
Oh, no. One way to go back to, you kind of explained why I got into the Westerns, the TVs, because of the popularity and everything going on at that time. You got to go where the money's going to come from. But I posited earlier to you guys is his style and the way he was able to chameleon, like I said earlier, covering, going all the different genres. If you could explain a little bit of how his style was so conducive to working in all these things. Because not every writer was as capable as he was to do that. I mean, every writer, there's a lot of writers that wrote in all the genres, but not all of them could be as successfully done as Matheson did. I was wondering if you could talk about that aspect of his strengths, of how he was able to be so prolific in the genres.
That's an interesting question. He's written in so many different genres. I think what you led with is part of it, just his skill level and his ability to take, the single man against crazy odds, and work that into kind of whatever genre he wants. I think the fact that he was so steeped in westerns, as you mentioned, he was in the hospital and reading so many of them and enjoyed them, helped him just sort of, try and do some in that vein. And some of the letters that he wrote back and forth to his professor at the University of Missouri and his friend George at Berkeley, he would say things periodically about, how I need to take some time off and write some straight stories because I want to be able to do some of that too. I don't want to get, pigeonholed, yeah, just as one genre. So he was, and he when the Western sold, one of his later Westerns, he wrote to his professor, Peden, he wrote to Peden and said, I always like to be selling outside of my field. So I think a desire specifically to broaden, his oeuvre and write in different genres was something that motivated him. And just the fact that what he liked to write about fits in kind of all over the place, I think was probably one of the things that helped as well.
Yeah, I was going to
Sort of the
say
skill level.
that,
Masterful stories.
he always said that the leitmotif, his word, not mine, of all of his stories was, the one man against insuperable odds, or however you phrase it. And it's true, a lot of the Western stories, they set up a situation where, the insuperable odds are not that you're shrunk down to this size and you're stuck in your basement, but from the perspective of the main character, he may feel like, oh, I have to face down this guy, he's the greatest gunman in the world, I'm doomed for sure, what the heck do I do? Or I'm vastly outnumbered, or whatever it is. So yes, they do kind of dovetail nicely, so I think that's probably a big part.
He's great at character development, and that works everywhere, if you do it right.
His ability to make everybody relate to the characters that were going on is masterful. And isn't one of the short stories that he did in one of his collections about a lawman who's losing his law sight? Somehow a gunfighter is losing his eyesight, and he has problems in how he deals with that.
That sounds awfully
Yeah,
I think he's in the one with the 6 stories.
Oh, in By the Gun?
By the gun.
Yeah.
Probably.
I did a little bit of research. Like that.
Yeah.
Maybe more than we did.
I was going to say.
We've read all these, but not lately.
Well, I haven't
We're
read
not
all.
like,
I think he did do one like that.
Yeah, I'm trying to find. I think the clue is in the name, and it was published under a couple of different names. But
I was just using that as an example. It's just how he can fit in, make the characters relatable. Because as we get older, we're all learning that eyesight and other frailties in life, and how it applies to a gunfighter would be an intriguing story that I really want to get and read.
Yeah.
Because that's why I remembered it.
I think it was his first one actually. It was originally published as They Don't Make Them Tougher, but it was also known as Gun Sight.
I was just going to say it's probably a play on words. Yeah.
And I think that was the one.
I hesitated to link because if I recall correctly, the Michael Winner movie with Burt Lancaster called, interestingly coincident, Lawman, I think that has a similar premise. If anybody's seen that, and can confirm or deny, but he's losing his sight and would be able to cut the mustard.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember that element in the Lawman movie.
Minnesota Clay?
Oh, but that, I know of that one too, because Mario Bava worked on it.
There's a movie with Robert Bryan who plays the sheriff in Lawman, in the Lawman movie, not the series. I can't think of the name of it, where he's losing his sight. But it was like a 50s Panavision Technicolor, big deal production.
Okay, you may be right. Anyways, I was afraid I was mixing that up with the story he was asking. Yeah, I think
There's a
that
spaghetti western called Blind Man.
Yes.
Ringo Starr.
Yeah. So it's not the only time it's been done. Maybe you did it first. I don't know. Probably.
They might have heard, read it in his thing. It's like, oh, and obviously if it works, it's copied and move it over. I mean, how many original ideas are there out there anymore? It's just how you package it. And that kind of thing. Do you have, before we pass it up to the group, anything else you guys want to bring up about the Westerns before we ask what these guys want to ask you?
I think we covered everything.
I think so. I'm ready for questions if you are.
Yep.
Okay.
I know a few of you have been asking some, but anybody else?
Are you guys ready for questions?
If you don't ask, then they're probably going to start asking you questions.
Well, the one big difference between, say, the Twilight Zone episodes and the series like Lawman is that Lawman is a ongoing series with set characters that you have to write chore you have to write, because I'm a writer, and you have to learn to write for the characters. I went on to Boston Legals, and I had to learn to write for the characters, and write, that's a very different skill set than writing of an individual episode in an anthology series. And I noticed that he did not continue to do that. He never had a set character. He did a couple of Kolchak movies, I guess, but other than that, he never really did the continuing characters type work in a series. When he certainly could have. He obviously decided he didn't like that, I guess. What do you think about that?
I mean, as far as why, well, I think.
Or, you know, he didn't write any more episodes of Star Trek.
Right. I mean, there are all sorts of reasons for those things, but I think part of it was probably that across his career, you see that he never liked to repeat himself.
Yeah.
And it's often been observed, who was it, somebody earlier today said, you make a big mark in some area, and then like, as soon as it started to get successful, you could pull out.
Yeah, I said that, yeah.
It's great.
And that's why there's so much variety in his work, because he just, he said, once I've done something, I don't want to do that again. I want to move on and do something else. So I think certainly that would be one reason why he said, I don't want to write another of this guy or whatever. And it's true, if you look at his work, I mean, both as a screenwriter and for prose, there's almost nothing you could call, a sequel. One of the few other examples I can think of that was never produced was he was hired to write a sequel to The Incredible Shrinking Man, The Fantastic Little Girl. And The Fantastic Little Girl was actually Mrs. Shrinking Man, not a girl by, our standards. And supposedly when Scott Carey was up on the deck of the boat and got exposed to the radioactive mist, she was down below getting the beer, but she did get a limited exposure to the mist.
It just took longer.
Right, it took longer, and I don't know, they didn't address it. I don't think they addressed the fact that Scott Carey wasn't just exposed to this, but he also interacted with some insecticide, and that's what did it, but never mind. So she ended up shrinking down and joining him in his microscopic adventures, and I think at the end, some days, Machina brings him back both to normal size, which I'm sure is how Universal would really rather have ended the first movie. And I've always found it fascinating that they did not insist on that. They did insist on having the story told in a chronological order in Incredible Shrinking Man, which the book does not.
Yeah.
And Richard said he tried doing it that way when he first started around. He said, it doesn't work. It's much, you grab the reader much better if you start with him at 6 inches tall or whatever, and then you follow him down, but also go backwards and see how he got that way. But he said Universal was not.
I've got some letters that he wrote.
Oh, about that?
I'll be bringing that up later.
Oh, cool.
Can I comment on that? Of course. Believe it or not, on my show, we just did The Incredible Shrinking Man. Why not? Because I knew I was coming here. And because Universal did, as you said, they wanted him to do it. The director, Jack Arnold, refused to do it. And they did a test screening. And the test screening, the people came back, enjoyed the ending as it was. If that positive feedback would have come back from the audience, then he would have been forced to do it. So yeah, he did play it, but Jack Arnold was refused to have it go that way, because it would have, to me, detrimentally altered this whole premise of the story.
Of course.
And the other guy did it, he liked that it was changed to make it linear. I liked it better when it was non-linear, and I would have loved to have seen it in the movie that way. But I can see everybody has a different way of approaching movies, and of course now there's more and more now these non-linear storytelling. But of course, the Odyssey is a prime example of non-linear storytelling that's only been around for a couple thousand years.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess they probably figured, we're already going out on a limb here with this cockamamie ending of it dwindling to nothing. Said, let's at least be conventional enough that we're going to tell it in a chronological order. But so I think he did do this Fantastic Little Girl, which was never produced, although the script has been published in one of Gauntlet's books. But that's the only other example I can think of, other than The Night Stranger with the Kolchak return, where he did any kind of sequel, follow-up, whatever. So
he was actually kind of fortunate that his career timed out to reach his sort of sudden peak with the Twilight Zone, when there were so many of those anthology series on the Twilight Zone thriller, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, because 10 years, 15 years later, there were none of those. The writer wouldn't have a choice. He would have
So
to-
he'd have to be doing,
He'd have-
yeah.
yeah,
It's an
exactly.
interesting observation, I hadn't thought
Yeah.
about that,
I
but
would
you're
say-
right, that's very intriguing, yeah.
Let's say if you watch those westerns back then, like Gunsmoke, Have Gun Will Travel, they were actually anthology
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah,
The characters couldn't change, stay the same, but if you notice, especially on Gunsmoke, I mean, Matt Dillon has got later on, he was barely in, beginning and end, and all the focus was on the guest stars.
yeah, that's
So
true.
the guest stars from it, they could do anything they wanted.
Yeah, I mean, you had a rotating cast of characters, and then you had the steady, the
Right.
main folks there. So maybe he would have been satisfied with that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe the main characters would have gotten bored because he wouldn't have been writing stuff. But all about the second fiddles. But,
That's a really good point.
I've read several of his westerns, Gunfight and the Wild Bill Hickok, and also I've watched the episode of Yaki, and he seems to be very interested in debunking the myth of the gunslinger. And I was just wondering, where this came from?
I don't there's nothing in the correspondence, I assume, right? Or,
No, I haven't seen anything in there that talks specifically about that.
but it is true that, there were certainly, even just among the Lawman episodes, there were several of them that had, that depended on this idea of, the guy whose reputation was so great as a gunfighter, that he couldn't, live with it or whatever. The premise of Little Jack Cornered is that in the story it's nothing, of course it's not the characters in the show because they had to adapt it for that, but the main character ends up killing in a gunfight this prestigious gunfighter, and then he's worried all along that the guy's son is going to come after him to avenge his father, and so he finally encounters the son, and it turns out that the son has no interest in this whatsoever. He doesn't want to have that life, and he wants to just, leave the whole thing alone, so just as well. But yeah, that whole idea of the mythology, it's like that, what's that,
Yeah.
the Gregory Peck, is it the gun?
Yeah.
The gunfighting, right, same idea, oh my God, everybody's challenging me, and I can't do this. But no, where that came from, I honestly, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I found the Robert Bryan Blind Marshall movie is The Proud Ones, 1956. Robert Ryan and Jeffrey Hunter. It's written by Edmund H. North, who did
Dave Thurston
Dave
Still.
Thurston Still and Patton.
And Patton, yes. Now, so Lawman, the Michael Winter, is he not losing his sight in that?
I don't think he is, I thought that's different.
Yeah, I
Right.
found, yeah.
Well, it just means we have to watch it again.
That's
right.
Early Robert Duvall credit on that movie.
Yeah, it's clear to me I need to go back and revisit these westerns. It's been a while since I've read them. We just found out like 3 weeks ago maybe that we were going to be doing a westerns panel. It was like, oh my, I better brush up. Didn't have time to
With the day job and everything,
I know.
who can really go back and reread all this stuff? So.
That's
But,
better than one day.
Yes, that's true. That's true. It was luxury compared to that.
I will say, one of the things that I've talked in some of our sessions already today, and maybe even today a little bit about what a sense of humor Matheson had that isn't always evident in his writing. But if you pick up the memoirs of Wild Bill Hickok, I'm pretty sure that's the one. It might have been one of the other novels. But there are some howlingly funny scenes in that book. And so I do recommend, working your way through some of the westerns. Yeah.
He also wrote one that ventured into the supernatural book, Shadow on the Sun.
Right, that was the
Yes.
thing that he was started as a film project for Samuel Goldwyn
Oh,
that
okay.
never got off the ground.
Goldwyn couldn't really understand what he was trying to do.
Yes. But it's an unusual, very interesting book. Yeah.
Yeah, it was published in '94, I guess. Another Evans did 4 books.
Yep.
And then it was Joe that did the paperback of Wild Bill Hickok.
Oh, so it wasn't the.
Berkeley did the other 4. They did.
Oh, but it's the same company.
Are they part of Berkeley?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah.
So incestuous, the publishing business.
I have to confess, I don't think I've ever read the memoirs of Martin Dillon.
Oh.
See, because it was never a hardcover, so I said,
Right.
good.
Yeah.
One of the few things of Richard's I still have.
I'll wait for it to come out of the hardcover.
Right. It wait a long time.
We have a few minutes left. Do you have time for more questions?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure.
Anybody else have any questions left? Like you said, you guys did a great job. I love the information. Like I said, I came in not really knowing anything about his Western background, which I think some of you did know. Some of you might be like myself, coming in with just very, very little knowledge. And I was very informative to learn the depth of his genre work and how he was able to get these different things in there. I'm looking forward to getting the short story collection to go for that, because like I said, the Gunsight one is intriguing to me, and knowing how he writes the characters with the flaws that we have and put them in those circumstances. I think it's going to be something, whether it's Western or not, I think it's just good storytelling. And I think that's why he's able to cover all the genres. And I want to thank you guys for both doing this and putting this work out there and helping keep Matheson alive.
Our honor.
100 years, amazing, it's just amazing.
Have you seen Night of the Eagle?
Yes.
I noticed that not only does Charles Beaumont and Richard Matheson, but Fritz Lieber is a co-author of that film.
Well, he wrote the novel it was based on, he didn't work on the film.
I see.
It actually was filmed at least three times. Yeah, it was, what's the?
It's in the
Weird
Sanctum
Woman.
where-
Weird Woman thing, which I've never seen. Universal was part of the Inner Sanctum
Yeah.
series.
It's the
And
best
Lon
one.
Chaney Jr., what?
I think it's the best one in the series.
Oh, I've never seen any of
Yeah,
that. And then that one, and then it was done as a comedy, which is Bruce,
Richard
right?
Benjamin and.
Richard
Paul
Benjamin,
Prentice.
Terry Garr, and I forget who the other woman was.
Under that title?
Which is Brood, yeah, which was one of those ill-fated, they filmed part of it and then it was a train wreck and then somebody else came in and filmed more and
It's a mess.
yeah, it's a mess. There were apparently, Richard told me years ago, that Ernest Dickerson wanted to do an all-black version of it, but it obviously never happened, so there would have been a fourth version. And there's a TV version, it was made from an episode of some anthology show. It was actually, I think, maybe more faithful to the book than any of the other versions, I don't remember. Oh, I didn't see it, but what's his name? I forget why you brought it up. The guy, Alan Warren, the guy who wrote the book about Thriller.
Oh,
For some reason, he brought it, it's not a thriller, but he brought it up, and I think he claimed, because I've never seen it, that it was more faithful to the book. So, many films of that. Interesting novel, too.
Yeah.
But what a great movie. Oh, man.
Well, thanks everybody for coming.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, this is